How many people would be willing to pay to watch someone else's humiliation and suffering? South Korea is known for its advanced technology and pop culture, but what many people don't know is that it's also the epicenter of a very dark corner of the internet. And among the most disturbing and bizarre cases that have come to light, there is one in particular that was extremely intense. We know that Asians tend to be somewhat perverted, but what was happening here makes you question a lot of things. The Nth Room case was a distribution network for abusive content that exploited and degraded people of all ages, forcing them to perform extremely cruel acts. This case became highly publicized in South Korea and worldwide, thanks to the brutality and the level of organization of those responsible, who operated in the underground world of South Korea's internet. In case you didn't know, in South Korea, pornography is completely illegal, and since 2019, the government began applying stricter filters to censor all kinds of explicit content. This caused different ways of sharing adult content to emerge, mainly through messaging services like Telegram. And yes, Telegram involved in another shady case. This app is known for its strong security and privacy controls, making it the perfect platform to discuss or carry out any illegal activity. A clear example of this happened in early 2019 when South Korean authorities received a report about the existence of a Telegram chat room, where explicit material obtained through extortion and threats was being shared. It became known as the Nth Room. It was a Telegram chat room, created and managed by a user named God, who greeted you with the following message when you entered. The photos and videos in this room were obtained by threatening women who have strayed from the path. The girls who didn't do what they were told and ran away, do whatever you want with them. And I'm sure some of the people here joined to see if their photos or videos were in the chat. Don't worry, you have nothing to fear if you did what we asked. As I mentioned, any sexual or explicit content is illegal in South Korea. Despite this, some girls, mostly young women, uploaded photos and videos doing things. Well, you know what I mean, expressing their sexual desires. Knowing this, God located them, contacted them, and pretended to be the police, assuring them that they could be arrested for posting this type of content and that he would inform their parents. He also sent them a link with the message, "We found out who you are." When the victims clicked the link, they were hacked, allowing him to obtain all their personal information. This data was then used to extort, threaten, and force them to comply with everything he demanded, or else he would expose them. These women were called slaves. The victims were not only forced to record all kinds of audiovisual material, but were also coerced into performing degrading and humiliating acts. They were made to bark and eat dog food, consume extremely unsanitary substances, wash their face with bodily fluids, self-harm with knives, stab themselves with pens and scissors in sensitive areas, undergo sexual assault, and many other things I prefer not to describe so YouTube doesn't demonetize my video. And in reality, it wasn't just one room. There were many. That's why it was called the Nth Room, because there were several, and they functioned with professional level logistics, organization, and hierarchy. God shared a small clip from the videos in room number 1, making it very clear to members that if they wanted to see more, they had to pay. Something like a twisted version of an adult website, but for sadists and disturbed people. Members who wanted to continue watching made payments through gift cards. After paying, God sent them a link to access a second room. Once inside, he shared the full content, offered even more disturbing material, and promoted access to the next room. This process repeated progressively until reaching the 8th room. The more exclusive and expensive the room, the more degrading and violent the content that was distributed. Each level contained hundreds of files from 3 to 4 victims, totaling between 20 to 30 victims across the 8 rooms. Additionally, each room had between 300 and 400 members. God liked to maintain strict control over the number of members and active victims, likely for security reasons. To enter the first room, they had to first pass through another room called Gotham, administered by Watchman. In God's rooms, members were not allowed to comment, but in Gotham they could. So, as you can imagine, this room was filled with completely deranged conversations and comments discussing the videos shared in other rooms. Critiques, opinions, and even planning how to commit sexual crimes against the victims. By mid-2019, there were 4,000 members registered in this room, and by the end of the year there were around 7,000. We could say that in Gotham, Watchmen provided promotion and generated conversation about the content as a way of advertising to drive members to buy access. In other words, God handled production and Watchmen handled promotion. The organization these people had wasn't seen even in top professional companies. In August 2019, God decided to step away from all this, claiming he needed time for his studies. As part of his departure, he closed 7 rooms and left only one under the administration of someone named Kelly. But the problem was that the content didn't just stay in God's rooms. Users downloaded it and shared it in other chat rooms as well. In September 2019, a similar room emerged, this time under the administration of Baksa, whose name in Korean means doctor or professor, another South Korean predator who took over. Although his methodology was similar, Baksa's rooms differed from God's. In God's setup, you could access the first room for free and then pay to enter the others. In Baksa's rooms, you had to pay from the very beginning. It worked more like a subscription service where a single fee granted access to all the content in the room. Depending on how much you paid, you had access to different rooms. $100, $200, $500, and some rooms cost $1,000 to $1,500. In the cheapest room, users only had access. In the next one, they could send messages and chat. One level above, they could make specific requests. And at the highest levels, those who paid more obtained full control over a victim in real time, treating her as their personal slave. Not long ago, it was discovered that there was an even more exclusive tier of members. Those who paid the highest sums were moved by Baksa to a chat room outside Telegram, using an app called Wicker, which he claimed offered far greater security. Payments were made with cryptocurrency, specifically Monero, known for its privacy features and untraceable transactions. The total amount of money made from all this is unknown, but estimates say it reached millions of dollars. If in the previous rooms users already had total control over victims and forced them to do whatever they wanted, what kind of things happened in this new room? Authorities estimated that the number of members in Baksa's rooms was about 15,000 people, although for a long time it was believed that the total number exceeded 260,000. Another difference between Baksa's rooms and God's was how they recruited victims. Baksa published fake job ads seeking inexperienced models with high pay. This attracted all kinds of women, mostly attractive ones, especially those in urgent financial situations who were more vulnerable to manipulation. When they applied, Baksa manipulated them to obtain some form of intimate content to blackmail them, forcing them to record the material he wanted, or rather, what his clients requested. Something surprising, though you probably already guessed it, is that Baksa didn't operate alone. He had a full team supporting him, including a public official who helped him obtain sensitive and confidential information about potential victims. Do you know why the police began investigating this case? It all started thanks to a group of female university students who discovered the existence of these rooms and gathered enough evidence to file a report. If it hadn't been for them, the truth about what was happening might never have been revealed. Interestingly, the report was filed almost at the same time that God decided to abandon his rooms. Remember that before leaving, he left the only active room under the control of someone named Kelly? Well, barely a month after God handed over control, Kelly was arrested by the police. And after several months of investigation, on March 16, 2020, authorities captured Baksa along with 4 other suspects. They also arrested Watchmen, the administrator in charge of the Gotham room. During the operation, authorities captured around 120 people connected to the Nth room, of which at least 30 were sentenced to spend decades in prison. The only one still missing at that moment was God, one of the masterminds behind the original Nth room. When Baksa was captured, the media began massive coverage of the case, turning it into one of the most atrocious in South Korea's modern history. Koreans demanded life sentences for those responsible for the rooms. Public outrage grew so much that society demanded not only legal justice, but also moral and social condemnation for the criminals involved. In South Korea, it's common to protect the identity of criminals. Especially in minor crimes or cases involving minors, this is done to avoid social stigma and help with rehabilitation. However, in rare cases involving severe crimes, authorities make an exception and decide to disclose the personal information of those sentenced, considering the gravity and societal impact. For this reason, the government submitted a formal request to reveal the identities of those involved in the Nth room case, a petition that quickly surpassed 2 million signatures within hours. Actresses, singers, and well-known public figures joined the cause, mobilizing their followers to collect as many signatures as possible. Obviously, after a few days, the identities of those involved were made public. The worst and most shocking part for the country was that Boksa, whose real name was Choe Jobin, was only 24 years old. Throughout the time he ran the telegram rooms, he claimed he lived in Cambodia and that he was an older man to avoid suspicion about his real identity. When he was captured, Boksa vehemently denied being the culprit. He said he had no idea who Boksa even was, but eventually, after some pressure from police, he admitted it. Something that remains unclear, or at least the authorities never stated publicly, is why he appeared at the press conference wearing a neck brace and with a head wound. According to reports, it was because he repeatedly tried to harm himself, hitting his own head, possibly as a manipulation tactic. During that press conference, he apologized to the victims, but with a frightening coldness. It seemed like he didn't care at all about what he had done, only that he had been caught. What's strangest is that he made a statement that drew a lot of attention. At the end of the press conference, Boksa said,
멈출 수 없었던 악마의 삶을 멈춰주셔서 정말 감사합니다.
And he also explicitly apologized to the president of the South Korean news channel JBC, to a journalist, and to a former superintendent as well. Obviously, I won't mention their names so people don't make fun of me. The point is that nobody knows why he apologized to these people. Authorities found no connection between Boksa, those individuals, and the Nth Room case, leading them to believe that they were probably victims of unrelated scams Boksa had carried out. Because yes, this guy wasn't just a sick, degenerate predator. He was also an expert in multiple types of digital fraud. He pretended to be a seller of drugs, weapons, and all kinds of black market services. He blackmailed wealthy people and even planned contract killings. In other words, Boksa was literally a criminal in every aspect of his life. And all of this at just 24 years old. The most surprising part is that Boksa was known in his environment as a kind, shy, and very respectful guy. He volunteered for a charity helping poor and disabled people. He also participated in the student newspaper, where he wrote an article about the importance of education and preventing sexual violence on university campuses. Literally, it couldn't have been more ironic. On the other hand, God, whose real name was Mong-hyun Wook, was captured a few months later, specifically in May 2020. After his arrest, he was charged with rape, exploitation, distribution of explicit material, and human trafficking. During the trial, the defense tried to argue that God didn't intend to harm anyone, that he didn't understand the magnitude of his actions, but no one believed that. Despite his dark online behavior, outside the internet, God lived a relatively normal life, just like Boksa. He was a 27-year-old university student with part-time jobs, which contrasted drastically with the persona he presented online. A powerful, ruthless figure who exploited hundreds of people. It was discovered that he lived with his parents, and that despite earning huge amounts of money from his network, he seemed to live modestly and not flaunt his profits. South Korean society was shocked to learn that seemingly ordinary individuals were behind such a destructive and violent scheme. Months after his capture, at the end of 2020, he was sentenced to 40 years in prison, one of the longest sentences ever given for a crime of this nature in South Korea, meaning he will remain in prison until 2060. After uncovering what happened behind these rooms, question is so much privacy really necessary on a social platform? How much responsibility should fall on the platforms that allow this type of activity? Should we sacrifice part of our privacy for tighter control over what happens on these platforms? Or on the contrary, do we risk that such control becomes a kind of digital Big Brother? The worst part is that we're not talking about a group of amateurs. We're talking about an organized system that generated millions of dollars based on the suffering of real people, some of them minors. The surprising thing about God is that he wasn't a typical criminal. He understood that the internet could be much more than a place to chat and share memes. He managed to manipulate victims' trust with empty promises and the constant threat of exposure, while keeping his face hidden behind an alias. And he did all of this from a simple cell phone. Of course, his downfall was inevitable. But how many people are out there right now doing even worse things and will never be discovered? I think we can take this Nth Room case as a reminder that the internet can be, and in fact is, a very dark place if you're not careful. The answer to any of the questions I've asked is not simple. And if this case proved anything, it's that the internet, like life, has very good things and very bad things. So, where do we draw the line between digital freedom and the necessary control to stop these crimes? That, my friends, I'll let you debate in the comments. And well, thanks for watching this video and supporting the channel, especially you, for watching it all the way through and not stressing about my inappropriate comments. Subscribe, leave a like, and comment anything so I can reply to you in a flavorful and disturbing way. I'll leave some videos you'll surely find interesting, and I'll see you next time.